Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on online teaching. I'm Marlo Daly Galliano, and I'm so happy to have you all here. Before we get started, I thought we'd do a quick round of introductions, and I'll just call on people in the order you appear on my screen. If you could say your name and where you work, and then I'll let Angela tell you a little bit about our book club feature, and we'll get into talking about some of our ideas about online teaching. And then our plan is that the second half of the session will be an open conversation about things we've tried, things we want to do, challenges, and approaches we take to online teaching. So Christina, could we start with you?
Yes, I'm Christina Brando-Subis, and I am with the Teacher Education and Mathematics Division.
Great, thank you. Heidi?
I'm Heidi McMillan in the Justice Studies program up on the Coeur d'Alene campus.
Thanks, Heidi. Angela?
Angela, Justice Studies in the Listing campus.
Thanks. Heather?
I'm Heather Van Mullen. I work in physical life, movement, and sports sciences.
Thank you. Rachel?
I'm Rachel, and I'm with Heather in PL Mass.
Thanks. Alicia?
Early Childhood Development Program, Alicia Robertson.
Thank you. Marcy? Oh, you're muted, Marcy.
I'm Marcy Halpin. I am in the Humanities Division and I teach communication classes.
Great, thank you. Amy?
Amy Minervini, Humanities Department, teach composition.
Thanks, Amy. Angela, did you want to say a little bit about the book club and the book before we get into talking about kind of our individual ideas and approaches?
Sure. So before I start, my camera's over here, but I'm looking at you guys. So it may not look like I'm looking at you, but I'm looking at you. So don't let where my eyes are focused throw anybody. So every semester, the CTL sponsors a book club for faculty. We send out notices about a week or two before the semester starts to gauge interest and to sign up. The CTL does provide copies of the book. We meet about 3 times a semester, usually 3 times a semester for about an hour to discuss what we've read. And it's a great way to learn about pedagogy, but it also really promotes campus interactions. You know, due to our schedules, we miss the social parts sometimes, and this allows us to get together and chat. It's very relaxed, very informal. If you're interested in the book club, be sure to watch for updates in Marlo's newsletter that comes out weekly. We would love to have you join us next semester. Have we picked a book for next semester?
Not officially.
Okay.
We have some ideas floating around.
Yeah, but yeah, watch for that. We'd love to have you join us. So last spring, we reviewed a book, Small Teaching by Flower Darby. This book right here. Yay, see, look, we all got it. And it has an intro by James Lang. And I think to frame the book, we have to talk about what small teaching is in general. And this term was coined by Lang in his book, Small Teaching, not Small Teaching Online, just Small Teaching. And basically what this concept is small teaching explains how minor modifications in our teaching can really have a major impact on student learning. So the key is, according to both of these books, is to make intentional small adjustments based on how people learn. And so the book breaks down some of the science of learning and whatnot. It's a non-threatening approach to help students and faculty in the long run. It could be making a small change to an activity. Like in the physical classroom, it can involve low stakes activities, which allow students to retrieve and reframe data that they've learned, which helps with retention. In the online world, it can be employed in a number of different ways. And I think that that's what we're going to, well, I don't think, I know that that's what we're going to talk about today. So the people that are presenting today were in the book club last semester. We're missing some people, but yeah, so they're going to talk to you about different examples and approaches that they've applied to their online classes, and we'll tell you what worked and maybe what didn't.
Thanks, Angela. Christina, would you like to go first?
Yes, I'm going to screen share. Before I do that, though, I focused on the last part of the book that was talking about different strategies you can do that fostered independence, autonomy, student choice. Concept maps were brought up, and that's something I've done a lot of experimenting with mostly. So most of the presentation that I'm going to talk about is how concept maps can kind of target several concepts and strategies that the book was talking about. So don't let the length of it fool you. I just have a lot of student samples to show you as I go through this. Okay. So the three key takeaways for me for concept maps in general are that they summarize information succinctly. It helps you organize information in a different way. And then that you can use creativity to visualize relationships, which the book talked about making connections. And in this case, making connections between concepts. So the book talked a lot in some sections about making connections between course concepts. And I applied that to actually be making connections between the text reading that we've been doing in our classes. So the first way I provide autonomy is that students have a choice in the section that they complete. So I have a table set up. I say, 4 to 6 people sign up for each area that they're interested in, and then they create this concept map. And they can draw it out by hand and take a picture and upload it, or they can create something digitally. But they know that it has to be logical in some way. There's a clear chart or steps that show those relationships between their topics, but it also could be a theme. I say, like, if you're trying to show a hierarchical order, they might want to draw a ladder or a stair step. I've had students actually create like a spring scene, and then the clouds represent something and the raindrops are another thing that falls into the ground and the tree sprouts up. So it really allows them to get as creative as they want to. So here's a couple examples. So we get kind of the basic mind mappings. That's another way to think about concept mapping. So in this case, you can clearly, this one was kind of fun. So it was like a choose your adventure kind of a thing. So thinking about like English learners, are they literate in their home language? If yes, you go this track. And what tools do you use with that? If no, you go to a different track. So you can clearly see where, in this case, a student was making connections between the different concepts that they were working on. Here's a hand-drawn one that a student did about fluency. And so you can see that it gives kind of a brief history here, and then it talks and chunks it into 3 different strategies. So why is it important? What is it? And how can it improve? And you can see the activities kind of connect to what can improve fluency. So in this case, she got pretty creative too with the fluency calculator to kind of show that visual information. And all these chunks that they're summarizing are usually like 4 to 10 pages about at a time. The students, I say it's nice to make explicit connections if you can, to see what you're talking about with your different sections. So I liked in this case that she was able to kind of write on the certain lines she had drawn. So you can see the sections that's teaching phonics. What is it? What are some techniques you can use? And we talk about when we're doing traditional concept maps, it's nice to make connections between the different concepts. So here I would like to see more lines drawn particularly. So like decoding can connect to what teaching phonics is, showing letters and sound relationships. So sounding that out. So you can even get more involved and kind of draw lines in between your different areas to show those relationships. So we spend time talking about like what a traditional concept map would be. And then what my students ended up kind of just naturally doing is they weren't always the best at making explicit connections, but they were really great at summarizing their section and kind of breaking it down into chunks. So then I developed the handout choice. So you could do a concept map, or you can make a handout, which was more poster-like or visual. So you still succinctly summarize the information, but you didn't necessarily have to show those explicit connections. It was more about how can I showcase what I read for my peers and professor to read. So I provided a choice, concept map, or handout. And here's what some of the handouts look like. So some got pretty fancy. And again, you can see kind of students' creativity or strengths with what they were doing here. So in this case, you'll see there's 3 clear areas, but there's no lines drawn in between or connections made in between them. So it's just more of a visual of what was my section about. And then here's another example. So they had 3 different areas here and some examples with activities and things to do for vocabulary instruction. And then the most creative thing I've seen, which is not going to look as colorful, but the idea was pretty cool, is this student was trying to make sense about the important information in her reading. So she made herself like a note catcher. But then she filled it in to present it to her peers. And they were really impressed with that as well. So that was probably the most creative thing I've seen my students do when I mentioned handout. They actually made an example handout that you could give to students as they go through the reading. And then traditionally, what I had always done is they do a weekly reading response. So it started with just this. So they'd have to paraphrase the reading, the chapter they did. Then they would actually make a connection. So describe a connection you had with something in the chapter. And then the third question is that autonomy part where they have a choice. You can ask a question about something you read, or you can give a classroom application. And so, but I didn't want 15 weeks of just this. So I started with kind of this concept, kind of short paragraph essay type, and then moved to concept maps as well as handouts. So key takeaways from my key takeaways from the text here, I made a concept map to show them the kind of review. So we have the concept maps and choice and autonomy and creativity. So you'll see the double arrow there is that they all kind of flow and connect together, and that concept maps or other response variations that ensure students make connections, utilize choice, which is student autonomy, which can then showcase students' creativity. And for the most part, students have really enjoyed this activity. When it comes to online, they've posted in the discussion board, and then I have them go through and make a comment on at least one peer's map in a section they did not do their map on. So to kind of ensure that they're reading through and making connections between the content they might not have read about. This last spring, for the first time, I got feedback saying someone didn't really like the concept maps, and they wish they would have had more choice to do something different throughout the semester. And so I'm taking that and applying it to my in-person class actually this semester, but I'll continue to do that, is where after I've introduced all 3 response types, so they'll have to no matter what, and we talk about that if you're going to be teachers and want to do learning styles and try to reach all your learners, you're going to want to do a variety of activities, and it might not be your strong point, but it might be someone else's. So now once I've taught those 3, I'm going to actually give them choices the rest of the semester when they do their other reading responses to say, okay, you can do your traditional paraphrase, connect, question, apply. You can make a concept map. You can make a handout. And so they have that autonomy to kind of pick what they would want from there on out. I'm also toying with the idea of even adding a verbal response. So like record yourself giving your response and doing it just as a verbal soundbite or video response, which then I have to think about my rubric for that, because they wouldn't have grammatical things really necessarily that I'm grading on. So that's kind of where I'm trying to progress to, into maybe adding that 4th kind of audio or visual option if they want to just talk through their response. Those were my takeaways.
Thanks, Christina. Marcy, would you like to go next?
Get unmuted. So I also honed in on the creating autonomy chapter, which is chapter 7 out of the book. But and in that chapter, she identifies sort of 4 models: choice and discussions, self-enrolled, scaffolded groups, specifications, grading, and annotating or co-designing the syllabi. And I focused on discussions because I know that most of us use discussions, and I use discussions a lot in my classes. But I thought that it was helpful to think about choice and discussions. And she identified about 4 or 5 ways that she provides choice in discussion. So I was going to summarize those and then give you alternatives of what I do for choice and discussions. She says she provides 4 or 5 discussion questions to choose for each module of discussion for each chapter module. And then they can choose which ones they want to respond to in terms of the discussion questions. And they can respond to all of them or only a few of them or just one of them, as long as it's qualitative and content related, and it's a good sort of content-based discussion. She also says she does 12 or 15 articles that she has the students read, and then they get to choose 5 to summarize and discuss. Like each student gets to choose about 5 articles that they would summarize and discuss in their discussion, and hopefully all of the students then hit on different ones. She also says she posts 3 or 4 alternative discussion questions in addition to a 1 posted discussion question that everybody responds to. And then she has a what we did that week that impacts them personally discussion question that sort of involves choice. And then she also offers to record video instead of writing their post as a choice, that they can do video recorded post to the discussion. And I was thinking about the ways that I typically do discussion, and I came up with about 4 or 5 different alternatives from what she does that wouldn't necessarily be just choosing a bunch of articles or just discussion questions. The first thing that I've done in the past and this works really well if you have case studies, a book that has case studies that you're working with. But I've had students sign up to be discussion leader for certain weeks or to be the original poster for certain weeks, so that I have between 3 and 5 students providing the original post for the week, and then the rest of the class gets to respond to it. And what I've found is that reduces sort of the redundancy in the original post. I'm grading the replies differently than I'm grading the original post. Obviously, there's more weight on the original post because they've signed up for that week, or they've signed up to be discussion leader for that week. So they're getting a different type of grade than just participating in discussion as a replier. But what I've found students sort of outside of class that complain about, it's really hard when everybody is responding to the same questions to provide a unique post, that even like after they read through the post, they find themselves repeating and being redundant with what other people have said. So if I would have a requirement that you not copy what others say, if you post late to the discussion, it's really, really hard for students to be really original because they've read everybody else's posts and suddenly they're repeating them. And what I find is if I have them sign up to be the original posters for a certain week, then there's only 3 or 4 original posts, and then people can discuss off of those basic ideas. And then it reduces the redundancy a lot. So I found that to be really helpful, especially if, like I said, especially if there's case studies if your book has case studies, that everybody signs up for a different case study. And the other thing that I do in case study signups is that I make them sign up for 3 over the semester, and I block them out to beginning semester, middle semester, and end of the semester. And that way that somebody can't sign up for 3 at the beginning of the semester and then check out for the rest of the semester, that they're required to sign up for 1 in the first block and 1 in the middle block and 1 in the end block. The other tactic or strategy I use that provides them choice is that I like to use the bring an example model of discussion, or choose this to talk about, that they all have the same parameters of the assignment, but I will ask them to bring an example to the table. So for instance, if we're talking about corporate communications and diversity, I'll say, choose a corporation to look at their website and explore, make sure you click further into the website than the front page and tell me how they promote diversity on their website. So somebody will bring McDonald's to the table, somebody will talk about Coca-Cola, somebody will talk about Nike, and how through their advertising and their websites they promote diversity. And it provides all of these different examples for how all of the different corporations do this one thing. And it's the same maybe discussion questions, but because they're all choosing their own example in their own corporation that they're interested in, then it provides a lot of diversity in the discussion and a lot more interest in terms of the way the discussion flows. And that seems to be my favorite way of doing a discussion. I do that for a lot of different things, whether it be choose a public figure and talk about their ethos, or choose a corporation and talk about how they promote diversity, or choose an example advertisement that does this. And that, so I use that a lot for various different concepts and various different classes. The third alternative that I was thinking about that provides choice would be to do free association exercises with the students, that I have them bring like post images or symbols and explain what their free associations are to those symbols as related to some of the course concepts. And then everybody is, again, bringing different examples and different things. But because it's free association, then the discussion part of it is having the other students, what their free associations to those same symbols or ideas or words might be. And that always provides something very interesting. The fourth sort of strategy that I have is to provide challenges or trivias or games that they create, so that the students create a trivia challenge. And I'm actually in that process right now. This week, I've got my persuasion class online, and we're doing the advertising chapter this week, where it talks about brands and brand salience and brand position. And so I have them create their own sort of brand, a logo game, and they post 5 questions to challenge the other members of their class if they would recognize this logo or this brand or this piece of trivia or this jingle, or this slogan, absent the name of the company, to sort of connect with brand salience and brand position and recognition and that sort of thing. So challenges, and they can do this with trivia challenges to review for exams, but that's sort of, and I also do it as a sort of a 2 truths and a lie type challenge when we talk about narrative reasoning, that they're to tell 2 different stories. And so that always, it becomes a little bit of a game, and that switches up the discussion as well, but it's also their choice. They get to come up with the questions. So I think that's one way. I think I'm on 5. The 5th way that I've done, and this is kind of overlaps what she says, but I've had students share their research as part of the discussion, or do their research presentations as a discussion. And so after they've done their research for their research papers, then following that, have 1 week after they've already turned their papers in, then they turn in a presentation on the discussion board, and they can discuss each other's discussion. And that way you get that interaction of what they interact with what they were working on as their projects, as in addition to sort of reinforcing sort of the concepts they were studying, etc. And yet it was their choice, because they get to choose what their topics were for their papers. The only other one that I add, and this also kind of repeats, is to choose, and this isn't, I don't really do this with discussion, but I do it. I have what used to be my wiki, but I have journal pages where they have to post 10 posts over the course of the semester onto a page that's designed for them to be able to edit. And so I have probably 15 or 6, between 15 and 17 options of targeted assignments where they find an example and post it, and they get to choose, 10 out of the semester to post to. And that's in my persuasion class. It's for examples for advertising. So one might be an ethos, pathos, logos assignment. And one I know coming up later in the semester is holiday appeals. And one is about using spokespeople, and one is about using the scarcity tactic or what have you. And they find an advertisement that's used that is an example of that. And then they provide a little description connecting it to the concept. They post the example and connect to the concept, but they get to choose, again, they get to choose out of, there's multiple options, and they choose 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 6. Like I said, that kind of repeats or overlaps with her choose which discussion questions you want to respond to. And those were my ideas in terms of the discussion and choice. And I did have, one more comment on, sorry, not to keep going. One more comment on discussion. And this isn't really about choice, but it's about breathing. And I've just, in terms of discussion, I've always found it useful to give them breaks from discussion, like have a week off where they don't have to do discussion. That if they've got a paper due, there's no discussion that week, or if it's midterm week or some other assignment due, I try and give them a few breaks from discussion during the semester. And now I'll shut up.
Thank you, Marcy. That was great. Angela, do you want to share anything?
Sure. Marcy, I also use that approach. I started it last semester, and I get better discussion posts now when we miss a week than I did in the past when it was weekly. I'm going to talk a little bit about building the classroom community. It's important to me because I think if you have a good classroom community, the class is going to run smoother and people are going to be more invested in the class. In the book, they present a number of different ideas. Quite a few of them were helpful. A few more were a little controversial to me. One of the things they recommend is you spend an hour or 2 each day responding to each student's discussion post and replies. And that's a little time consuming because that's an hour or 2 per class each day. But sorry, that's a bone. Online classes, they create a distance between faculty and students and students and students. We lack the interactions that we get in the classroom. We can't pick up on the cues and whatnot. One moment. I hate my life. Okay, and this is recorded even better. So it creates the distance. One of the advantages of online learning, though, is that we get to hear from everybody. Every voice is presented when they post to the discussion. Sometimes in the physical classroom, we have students whose voices are drowned out by their louder classmates. And I don't mean louder in a bad way, just those that are more vocal. So what I've tried to do in my class is I've tried to get them really invested in discussion topics. I'll add at least 1 or 2 relevant news stories to the discussion topic that relate to the course concepts. But I will go for ones that maybe kind of hit at a little bit of an emotional response, kind of. For example, posting an article about a 6-year-old who had a tantrum in Florida and then was institutionalized for a week. Just things to get people to think and things that are going to really promote conversation between other students, because, I want the replies to mean something, because often we just say reply to 2 posts, have fun. And I want them to reply and go off and talk about what they've learned and expand from there. Other things that I do to try to build community, I regularly reach out to students. At midterm, I send a really long, detailed breakdown of their performance. Of course, their grade book is updated weekly, but I send out the long, detailed one to those who are doing very well in the class, giving them kudos. I also have an amnesty week, Angela's amnesty week, where any late work in the class, even if it's outside of the 1-week normal late period, I will open up and say, listen, just get it in this week. And so it gives students a chance who missed something in week 1 to get that in. I send reminders every week when I grade the next day. So stuff is graded within 12 hours of when it's due. I send the reminders out to students if they're missing anything because I want them to get an A. My goal is everybody in my class to get an A. But as we know, sometimes it's a little bit harder than you might think. Another way that I built community, something I tried this semester is I started recording these short 3-minute videos on concepts with little slides and stuff. And the book recommends using assessments to show the students have watched the video. I haven't incorporated that yet, but I probably will in the future using Edpuzzle or something of that nature. This semester is a test run because I want to see whether or not people actually watch my videos before I make these, But yeah, I've done several different things on a small scale that the book recommends, hence small teaching. I really liked a lot of the book suggestions. And I really encourage all of you, if you're interested in the book club, to definitely reach out next semester because we cover a lot of different books that focus on different aspects of pedagogy and making our lives a little easier, which is always a plus for me. So, all right, Marlo.
Thank you, Angela. And yeah, I just thank you everyone who's already shared ideas because these are so helpful. And just about the book club, I have to say, like every single book we've read, and I've done most of the book clubs since you and Rachel started them years ago. Like I have taken nuggets that have like transformed my teaching. So this one did as well for me. And I think I need to start with a disclaimer, which is that my load here at LC does not include very much online teaching, and I have taught online here and at my previous institution, but I usually don't. But I did this book club anyways, and I actually found it really helpful even for thinking about the design of my in-person classes, because it is a lot of these practices are, the first part of the book is set up around, course design. The second part is, the kinds of implementation that you would use in your class. And then the third is community. And so these are things that kind of are useful to us in any kind of teaching that we do. But one thing that I really took away from small teaching online was just thinking about the Canvas courses that I design even for my in-person classes. And, I'll be honest that some of them are better than others. Some courses, I started years ago before I really was even thinking about that online component very much. So it's just a bunch of documents, readings are there and there's not much else. But as I continue to build new courses or revise the ones I have, I have implemented just thinking about backwards design for courses. You can really reflect that in the design of your Canvas page. So starting with those objectives and making sure that those are stated on the Canvas page or in the module, in addition to in the syllabus. So, I'm kind of embarrassed that I don't do that more than I do, because it's so helpful for students, even if they've got that information on the syllabus or in other places, to be reminded of it when they get into assignment. So I found that idea really helpful. I also liked one of her activities that nobody has mentioned. Well, I guess a few of you have kind of referred to it, but she's got a 3 takeaways assignment where after, reading something or participating, you might have students share 3 different takeaways. And I actually love to do that in the in-person class. I usually do 1 takeaway, but you go around the room and I don't open it up for everyone to talk at once. Everyone gets their 1 turn to share their takeaway. And it does, kind of equalize how much people are participating in that portion of the in-person class. But I thought, and this is, it's a little embarrassing, but I'm going to share my screen for a little bit and show you one thing that I've been working toward is using chunking more effectively in my Canvas modules. So the first thing I'm going to show you is something that looks quite bad, and that I intend to work on. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully, are you looking at the CTL Canvas page right now? Okay. So if I go into modules and I show you the idea module, where did it just go? Skipping around on me. Okay, so this module has all of the amazing resources that we brought over from the web page. But as you can see, I haven't yet done much work to organize this. So students are faced with just this unbearably long list of things. And I did use headings to break them out, but it still is kind of overwhelming to see all of this right here. So if you teach online a lot, you don't have these problems because you're organized in a better way than I am, but you might have problems like this. I actually am hoping in Angela's session next week to learn how to use tabbed pages to organize large amounts of content within single pages in Canvas, because I don't know how to do that. But another area where I had a similar problem, it looked like this, just all this long line of stuff on the screen, where I thought about chunking and decided to do a little bit better job with that and put things in groups so that students could work with smaller amounts of information and content at the same time, was in our archived presentations section of the CTL site. So here, what I did is I broke the large number of videos that I wanted to include links to on the Canvas page into sections. And I started with a little introductory page, which this, if it were an actual course, I'd probably put learning objectives here. I didn't do that on this one, but that would be a nice place for it. But then as they go on, I just go into the section. So if you want videos on accessibility, well, we have one here. On Canvas and other online tools, you can break them down to just this area. And so that, that was not radical. It didn't take that long to do, but it wasn't how I had my Canvas course set up in the first place. And so I'm in kind of a process of just going back and rethinking how things are grouped and whether it could be more helpful for me to chunk in ways that are more manageable. And then the last thing I want to just say about this is one of the ideas from Small Teaching that I've thought a lot about is she really recommends only using images in your online course that convey meaning or content, not for a decorative feature. And I, of course, love decoration, but there are accessibility reasons. And also just, it can be confusing to students if they're not sure what they're supposed to do with an image. So in that section that I just showed you, it's not that exciting looking, right? There aren't pictures to look at, but it is maybe clear. So that was something that I was thinking about in course design there. So I'm going to stop talking now and open up this conversation. We still have 20 full minutes, and I don't know if there are questions, problems, challenges, or brilliant ideas that we haven't talked about that anyone would like to share from their own online teaching experiences.
Well, and I'm wordy, so talking about chunking, one thing I started doing is because I'd have a lot of content on a page. So when I was, getting ready for the next couple of weeks modules, I'd start reading it and then go, well, wait a minute, I already have a script right here. I just literally word for word read out a page worth of stuff. So then I will just record myself reading it. There's my script. I already have the script there. I could do captions, or I can just provide it underneath the video and say if you want the script or just want to read it. So that's what I've slowly started trying to do for mine, is put more videos in. instead of having so much to read. But yeah, I would love organization tips from anyone who's been doing this longer than I have, because my SCEs are always pretty good, except when it comes to organization for like my online courses. And I try to change things up during the semester, which sometimes helps or maybe hinders as I try to get feedback. But that's kind of where I'm at, is how to organize the modules and information on them.
I don't know if this, to me, visually it helps with organization, but I don't know if you've noticed in the text box area of Canvas, if you hit insert, one of the things that it allows you to insert is a line divider. And when I move from those big, like I usually have about 4 sections on a page, I try to mostly put my, like, I use the template that distance learning has provided for us. So I use their template, but I will still insert some of those lines on the sort of the first page where you do learning objectives and overview and the to-do list for the week. I put lines in between those sections, and I've added my own section. I put the week's reading at the very top to modify that first page of the template. And then I try and put all my lesson materials on one page for the week. So they're not, because I feel like students, if you put them on separate pages, students don't, they go to one page, they don't necessarily thumb through multiple pages unless they know to do that. And so I feel like that, just that little line break helps me visually separate my page when I've got a lot of content on a page for the lesson content, etc. And that way it allows me to separate, okay, here's my overview or introduction, here's the PowerPoints. And this semester I started doing the brief chapter outlines in there, also the PowerPoints, and then a separate line that separates like media content if I've provided any YouTube links, or and then explained what, how those little video clips that I'm providing connect to the course content.
That's so interesting to me, because see, my students didn't want to read everything on one page, as I had a lot of the stuff for that week on one thing. And then, first discussion posts and things, those were the separate. They wanted to like read the thing and then do whatever's associated with it, and then move on from that, and then go to the next page and read the thing and do what's on
That's
it.
funny.
So maybe it depends on semesters. Again, and that's my hard time too, is how much do I do and spend on it? And my wanting to please every single student every semester. So how not to drive myself crazy.
I just love that little line tool. I mean, it probably, visually to me, it makes it look more chunked and organized. Whether it does anything or not, I don't know.
And I just cut and pasted some code that I use in my class for lines that you type in. So like I have like a dark blue with white letters saying readings, whatever. And so it just breaks up the monotony.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask questions about building community, because for me, I find I ask my students not to respond to other students' posts, because I have found it so incredibly painful to read the responses. And it may have something to do, like in statistics, I don't try to form a community. Like it's just hard enough learning and everything. So, but my justice studies classes, I see room for improvement in myself, but like, is there anything else to do besides discussions? Like,
I know Melinda in Coeur d'Alene she was always talking about with the PACE program and stuff, she always likes to use like Padlet pages. And so for introductions and things, they can do like videos and all of that, and they introduce themselves and can post a bunch of things. It's like, it's almost like a mind map, a discussion place, like a page where students can look and share and look kind of just at multiple things.
what function is that? Like, can you do that in Canvas or what?
Well, in Canvas, you can create a page in your, just like you would create a normal page in your module. You can set that page to edit and like on the page functions, you can set it that who can edit it, and you can have it only teachers can edit it, teachers and students can edit it, or anyone can edit it. So you can have a page where the students can edit and post to that page.
Okay. Good.
And then I think I've seen in press releases, if you do use outside tools like Padlet and stuff, you can link it onto that page. So you would click on it and it would take them to the site to see everything.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I mean, I
like
think an alternative to discussion boards also in terms of community is to create some sort of group assignment where either in class or, you know, something that they're doing that is one of the assignments, they do have to work with other students, but there can be a lot of challenges with that and creating, you know, ways that are fair and equitable and accessible for all students are things that you have to think about. And so I definitely see where, you know, you wouldn't necessarily want to just jump right in to a group assignment, and maybe you already do them. And, you know, I think they have mixed results in terms of creating community. Sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes people are just like, I hate the people in my group.
Yes, it's true. Also, I wanted, who was talking about takeaways, like having students write down I love the idea of having students come up with the questions. Like, is that every session you have students write a takeaway?
Well, takeaways are different from the questions. So Marlo,
Right.
do you want to talk about takeaways?
The takeaways idea was, I think, one kind of discussion post that that Flower Darby recommends for students to do. And I didn't get the idea that she does it all the time. And I also don't use it all the time, but it's, you know, just a different way that kind of lets them make the content meaningful to them and then share that with their classmates. So the other thing that's great about that I have always found is that maybe they didn't take much away from a particular reading, but they see that their classmates did, and they're like,
Good.
I actually like the takeaway at the very end of the semester, like as like a final discussion post of, you know, what were your favorite takeaways from the class, or, you know, that sort of thing, or like, I like the takeaways kind of as a final discussion
Nice.
at the end of the semester.
And then for the students to come up with questions, how frequently?
I usually, well, I have a couple of different, you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can have them come up with questions as, well, I guess 3 or 4 different ways. You could have them come up with the discussion questions, would be one way to do it. And you could use that whenever you felt you wanted them to come up with discussion questions. You can also do it as an exam review where they come up with review questions for each other. I do it as sort of a game of like this week, it's an advertising brand recognition challenge. Come up with your own trivia questions and challenge your classmates. And that gives them a break from like a regular sort of discussion post as well, if they think they're kind of playing a little bit of a trivia game with each other. And then I also do a modification on 2 truths and a lie. So I don't do it all the time, but I do it to try and break up some of the other more normal discussion posts that I do.
Sure. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm always looking to cut like the perceived amount or actual amount of work my students do. And like I have a 4-credit class, and they always say, even with the 4 credits, it seems like it should be more. And so I like the takeaways, or like that's a good way to break up the discussion, but also instead of saying like you have to repeat, or not repeat, but state these, you know, 3 things or answer these 3 questions. I kind of like that it can be shorter almost too. Like what do you feel were the 3 key takeaways, or what are 3 questions you can ask based on what you read that your peers can respond to. So I like those ideas for adding some variety, but it also might cut down on some of the monotony of responses. Or like Marcy mentioned, like even with the Canvas option to like have them post before they see replies. I know as the instructor afterwards, if I ask something, that I'm reading 20 posts that kind of said the same thing anyway, you know? And so that's a good way, I think, to get a variety in there as well.
Sure.
Well, and sometimes like the takeaways or challenge question type posts, they're a little bit easier for them. Like you said, they're shorter. So to come up with five, like the brand challenge that I'm doing this week, to come up with 5 trivia questions to challenge your classmates. And then when they're replying, it's a guessing game, right? So do they recognize the piece of trivia or or the logo that somebody else has posed? And so it's not even doing the guessing game part of it as a reply is a little bit simpler and easier too. So.
Alicia or Rachel or Amy, did you have anything that you do in your classes, or, questions or challenges that you're thinking through?
I really appreciate all of the different ideas that you all have shared already, especially for changing up those discussions. I don't typically get repeated initial posts. I mean, they're not all exactly the same, and maybe it's the way I design the questions or what the topics are, but I usually get a pretty good variety, so I'm happy with that. And I think here lately, I don't know why it is, and maybe it's just different groups of students and their approach to doing discussions are different over the years or from semester to semester, but the discussions have been really good so far this semester, and I've really enjoyed the intentionality that the students have had so far. And because sometimes it can be kind of repetitive, and you can tell that they're really not reading the material and they're just kind of spitting stuff out there and seeing what's going to stick. And those are really boring. I think, Heidi, you were saying something about it can be painful to read these, but this semester has been pretty good. So I don't know what I'm doing different or if it's just a different group of students, but I like some of these additional ideas that I'd really like to try so it stays fresh and exciting for them. I know that sometimes discussion, I don't know, I'm a talky person, so I could go forever on those things. And so I don't want them to have to feel that way. But yeah, thank you for all of these great ideas. They're amazing. I'm going to have to get those books.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing about the discussions too. I think they're such a important part of the effective part of teaching, effective, not effective, right? The effective domain. And so they're kind of key, right? And so I don't know, having rules in the beginning really helps, I think, keeping them contained. I assume everybody has rules that or guidelines for discussion. I don't know, Heidi, do your students have guidelines?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't help.
But however, like, don't you teach biology?
Well, I teach a science seminar class that's all about belonging in science and how you feel about your science studies and what you see in science and why the classes work that way. So it's the affective part of science studying. So that's online. So that's the part where people have to share something emotional. And yeah, it's just,
No, I did it like in victimology class. Like they had me just about bawling this last week because of, talking about a crime that happened to somebody they loved or something like that. Which was then online, which is good. When we get into live class and gender and violence, I have to walk this really fine tightrope with people who are, taking this class that are survivors and, want to go to that emotional place. And then the other people who are incredibly uncomfortable with those kinds of things. And I don't want it to be like a therapy session. I'm trying to, help them cognitively process, what has happened. And so like discussions in that class and that's a live one are difficult. But I will say again about the topic, and I admire the way Angela does stuff, but for justice studies, like we don't get the fun topics like whose logo is this? Like, we're talking like law, loss of civil rights, loss of life, there's not a lot of happy in that, there's solutions, of course. And so I think maybe that tamps down the fun factor in my classes sometimes.
The same thing kind of happens in some of my child development classes. It can dredge up bad memories of their family and their upbringing. And sometimes you can have students in your class that it really hits a button. And some of them are so surprisingly out there with their experiences. And I can relate to what you said, where it makes other people feel very uncomfortable listening to those personal stories and experiences. And so it's, I understand that fine line sometimes with those topics for sure.
Right. I'll get feedback one year that, Heidi didn't let us talk enough in class. And then I'll try to, pivot a little bit. And then the next year I'll be like, Heidi let other people take over the class. And like, oh, God, I can't win.
I'm trying something new in my class this semester. It's empathy maps. And so I'm having students, and Heidi, this might be something kind of interesting, is I had students interview other people, but they could always interview themselves, maybe, or, each other, peers. And then as part of prior to the interview, they worked in groups to write a questionnaire. Are these like perfect questionnaires? No, but that's really kind of not the point either, I mean, I tried to give some guidelines, but they're of course not like, research, whatever, research sound, right? But these are, they're probably interviewing mostly people that they know. But they have to fill out an empathy map as part of that. I'll put a link in there where I I actually took this course over the summer. It was a Lemelson MIT problem solving course, and it was pretty intense. And so we worked with other people and we actually went through this process, and then, they want us to sort of replicate this in our classroom. So I pulled pieces and parts, and I loved this empathy map part. So as part of the interview, they fill this out, and then next week, so I just did this, next week, they will compare empathy maps. And apparently empathy maps is something that they do in the business world. I really had no idea, but it's a really great way of like pulling in a lot of information in a really short amount of time, and then coming to to ways to fix problems, which of course, Heidi, you said, there's lots of solution-based answers to these things. And so I'll see how it goes. But so the next step is they'll sort of compare empathy maps, and then they'll synthesize the information, and then later use the information, sort of how people want to solve the problem to come up with some sort of slightly innovative solution. So then they'll write their problem solving paper after that. And then they actually have to create a prototype of their solution after that. So it all kind of works sort of, kind of scaffolded into each other. So yeah, I'll see how it works. It's the first time I'm trying it. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm glad I whined a little bit. So I think that's going to help me a lot. So
yeah, it's really neat. And the students, I thought, would be very uncomfortable with it, just because, as I was presenting it, I wasn't so, authoritative. Like I've done this before and this works great. It was more like, I really hope this works, guys, but it worked really well when we tried it, so I actually put myself back in the student perspective and said, hey, we'll just see how this goes. And actually it's going greater than I expected.
Good. Thank you so much.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. And I also just wanted to point out, in case anyone doesn't have their chat open, that Christina just put a link to another resource on uncomfortable conversations, which also looks amazing. And I guess we are out of time, but thank you all so much for what was a really helpful and illuminating conversation. I appreciate all of your voices and perspectives.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.